The school started in 1800s. The last school closed in 1996. The schools were established to teach the Aboriginals to be more like the Euro-Canadian culture. The schools were government-sponsored religious schools. The kids were not allowed to talk their own language. They had to talk English. If the kids got caught talking their own language, they would get a severe punishment. Their punishment would be they would get beaten, strapped, their tongues pulled out and pinched. The boys got the most beatings. All the kids got taken away from their families and practically kidnapped. Brothers and sisters barely got to see each other. The schools were built far away from reserves. A very different world begins to take over the children's lives. They would say that in order to educate the children properly, they must separate them from their families. People say that this is hard, but if we want to civilize them, we must do this. They told the parents this was the best thing for the children and that they would be looked after really good. The kids would try to run away. The Aboriginals in the residential schools would die at a higher rate than in their communities. Residential schools operate on a half-day system, in which students spent half the day in the classroom and the other at work. School days began early. A bell would ring for students to get dressed and attend the chapel. The children in these schools had 3 hours of classes or periods. Evening recreation was limited and bedtime was early. Their meals were not bad, but they never got enough to eat. Some people say it was a good experience and others say it was torture. The schools were unfair to the Aboriginals. If the Canadian Charter of Rights was in place, the Aboriginals would have been treated fairly. If the equality rights existed back then, they would not have been treated like this. They would have been able to go to any school and not have to go to these schools. In the Charter, it says that every individual is equal before and under the law and has a right to the equal protection. They could not pick what kind of language they wanted. They also got treated badly because of not having the same culture and language as the white kids. They were discriminated against because of that. If the fundamental freedom rights were invented back then when the residential schools were in session, they would not have been forced to go to these schools. They could talk their own language and not get beaten. They could also pick a religion by their choice. They could think what they wanted, and they could also believe what they wanted. If the minority language education right was made, they could choose a language of their choice and not have to be forced to learn a language. They would be able to pick a school. If the language rights were invented, they would have the right to pick a language, either English or French, may be used by any person in any pleading in or process issuing from any court established by Parliament. The children in the residential schools got treated really poorly. Without the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Aboriginals could still be treated like this today.